Are your portraits too warm or too cool? Do they look too green or maybe too magenta? Well, you could be using the wrong white balance when you're working with artificial light sources like LED or flash, and this could be throwing your portraits way off without you even realizing it. So we're going to dive deep on this topic today. Let's get started. Let's start with the basics, color temperature. Every light source has a color, and that color is measured on the Kelvin scale. At the warm end of the spectrum, you've got candlelight and tungsten bulbs, down around 1000 to 3000 Kelvin. At the cool end, you've got open shade and overcast skies, closer to 7000 or 10,000 Kelvin. Daylight usually lands somewhere in the middle, around 5200 or 5500, depending on who you ask. But there's a problem. Your eyes are smart and they adjust automatically to make what looks white look white, whether you're next to a fireplace or standing outside at dusk. But your camera isn't that smart. It needs help, and that's where white balance comes in. And when you tell your camera or editing software what the light source was, it uses that information to correct things and give a more neutral looking image. If the white balance is off, your images might look too orange or too blue, even if they looked fine in person. And for portraits, that can ruin skin tones, distort the mood, and distract from your subject. White balance isn't just about correcting color, it's about capturing the feel of the photos. In most editing software, the Kelvin slider shows the color of the correction you're applying, like adding a filter, not the actual color temperature of the light source. That's why it displays blue on the left and yellow on the right, because you add warmth to cool images and blue to cool down warm images. Let's walk through the tools your camera and editing software gives you. Auto white balance is just a guess. Sometimes it's close, sometimes it's way off. Most of the time I use the daylight preset, typically around 5200 Kelvin on most brands. Most cameras also have a flash preset. Canon is around 6000 Kelvin. Nikon, Sony, and Fuji are about 54 to 5500 Kelvin. I shoot Canon, and I find that the flash preset often looks way too warm for me. You can also manually dial in the Kelvin value on your camera, usually somewhere between 2500 and 10,000 Kelvin, in order to get more consistent results across your sessions. You can also do this in post if you desire. Or you could photograph on set a neutral target, like a piece of white paper or a gray card, and use it in camera or in post to set a custom white balance. This adjusts both color temperature and the green magenta hue shift. A gray card is a physical reference that is colorless and exactly 18% gray, helping your camera or software figure out what neutral should look like under your lighting conditions. And of course, there's the most accurate method, using a color checker. I'll link to mine in the description below. Once your lighting is set, take a photo of the color checker where your subjects will be. Then, in post, you can use the included software to build a custom profile based on that image. This profile adjusts every color patch, giving you clinical accuracy across the entire spectrum. I feel that it's a bit too much most of the time, but it can be really helpful when you're photographing in a colored environment with a colored wall or perhaps an exposed wood ceiling, or anytime that you really need to reproduce accurate colors, like when you're doing a commercial photo shoot for, let's say, a product or a clothing brand, or maybe we're trying to capture a hair color and get it exactly right. But for most portraits, that level of precision isn't really necessary, and honestly, it can look a little sterile. So 99% of the time, I just use the camera matching standard profile in Lightroom and the generic camera profile in Capture One. And if you want to master this stuff so it becomes second nature, check out the Certified Professional Photographer program from the Professional Photographers of America. They have a multimedia education website that helps members prepare to pass a wide-ranging photography knowledge test. I've been shooting for a few decades now, maybe 3 of them, and I still find a few gaps in my knowledge that go back to things that I misunderstood early on in my career. When I prepared to pass the CPP, I took their practice test, and that helped me to realize a few gaps in the information that I had. There were some things that I mislearned a long time ago and didn't fully understand. So, preparing for the CPP and taking it is not just about memorizing the responses to questions, it's really about building a broad foundation so that you know your craft and you can succeed inside and out. Going through the process helped me learn that information, and I ended up using it to serve my clients, and then I passed on those skills to you in a past video. So right now, you can save $25 on your PPA membership by clicking on a special link in the description. So if you want to sharpen your skills, fill in those gaps, and join a community of over 35,000 photographers just like us, click on the link to get started today. Now let's talk about what's really going on there under the hood, because there are a few more things that affect white balance when you're using artificial light. Power level matters with flash. Color temperature shifts slightly depending on your strobe's output. The exact values vary by brand, but almost every strobe shifts color across its power range. I confirmed this in tests using my Sekonic C800 color spectrometer on multiple lights. The variation is usually small at studio power levels, but it gets more noticeable if you're using freeze, action, or color mode off in order to stop motion. In those cases, I recommend photographing a gray card and further correcting it in post. I break down how to freeze motion, including flash duration and ambient control, in this video right here. High-speed sync can also affect color, so when I'm using it, I shoot a gray card just to be safe. LEDs can shift towards green as well over time, so look out for that when you're using them. Now, let's talk about modifiers, softboxes, diffusion panels, and white fabrics. They all tend to warm up your light slightly. Bare bulbs and silver reflectors are more neutral, but compared to soft light, they look cooler, and in my tests at 1/4 power, a grid reflector barely changed the color. A softbox, however, dropped the color temp, meaning warmed it up, by 200 to 400 degrees Kelvin. So when I set my Canon cameras to daylight, 5200 Kelvin, hard light sources like bare bulbs and silver reflectors often are around 6000 Kelvin. That means that they are about 8000 Kelvin higher than your camera settings, which looks cooler by comparison. So when I do that, I need to use a higher white balance number in my post-production software so that the images will be corrected and look their best. I shoot with softboxes most of the time. Softboxes produce light that is typically around 5700 Kelvin. That's about 500 degrees cooler than the 5200 Kelvin daylight setting in my camera or software. But as it turns out, those images in those conditions don't look cool to me, so I usually leave them as is in post. So don't assume that daylight or flash white balance is always correct. It depends on your light source, your modifier, and your power levels, and whether or not you're using action stopping mode or high-speed sync. Plus, I almost never set a white balance in camera. RAW gives me the flexibility and control to do it later, so there's no reason for me to lock it in during the shoot unless I've got one of those nitpicky clients over my shoulder complaining that the images look to be the wrong color. Let's wrap things up with a positive creative note. I don't need to chase clinical color accuracy unless my work demands it, like those commercial shoots that I mentioned earlier. For most portraits, I just want the image to feel right. Sometimes I'll warm things up to flatter the skin tones. Other times I'll cool things down to give a cinematic vibe. White balance isn't just technical, it can be part of your visual style. A lot of photographers overthink white balance. They either treat it like it's a total mystery or they think that they have to use a color checker for every single shot. But to sum things up, most of the time, I just use the daylight preset and it works great. If I'm using hard light, action mode, high-speed sync, or something just looks off, I'll grab a quick shot with my color checker passport, but mostly I'm just going to end up using the gray card in order to dial in my white balance in post. You don't need perfect numbers and perfect images. It is an art and it is a science, but we don't need to have the science override our art. You just need a consistent workflow that helps your portraits look the way that you want them to. So take control of your white balance. And also, if you want to take more control of your color, white balance is just the beginning. Check out this video up here to learn how color space and color management can make your images more consistent, from raw to Instagram to print. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon.